Urban Leonard Drew, a fighter pilot most people called Ben, changed aerial combat forever during World War II. He came from Kentucky, had a calm voice and a Presbyterian upbringing, and had studied engineering for 2 years before the war pulled him away from slide rules and into cockpits. He thought about airplanes differently than other pilots did. While most flew on instinct and aggression, Drew approached flying as a mathematical problem. He memorized stall speeds at different bank angles and altitudes with various fuel loads, knew exactly how many degrees the ailerons deflected at full throw, and understood the precise service ceiling by heart. The P-51 Mustang was not a romantic machine to him. It was a system of lift, drag, thrust, and weight that could be understood and mastered through calculation rather than feeling. In the spring of 1943, the air war over Europe had become a grinding equation of altitude, speed, and ammunition. American bomber formations were bleeding aircraft every single day. German interceptors had learned to exploit the predictable patterns that American escorts followed. The math was simple and brutal. 8-hour missions, 30mm cannons, young men frozen solid at 23,000 feet. Fighter doctrine at the time was rigid and unforgiving. Energy equals survival. Never bleed speed in a turn. Never invert below 10,000 feet. Never sacrifice altitude for angle. The rule book had been written in the blood of pilots who tried to improvise and died for it. The Germans had adapted to American tactics. The Focke-Wulf 190s no longer engaged in traditional dogfights. They slashed through bomber formations at high speed, fired their weapons, and climbed away before the escorts could react. They exploited vertical space and the raw power of their engines. American pilots were trained to turn and leverage the superior agility of the Mustang. But agility meant time. Time meant fuel. Fuel meant shorter escort ranges. The bombers died alone as they flew deeper into Germany without protection. At Debden Airfield in Essex, England, the metal structures smelled like burnt oil and anxiety. Ground crews worked through mud and cold to keep the planes flying. Pilots attended briefings in Nissan huts that rattled whenever the wind shifted direction. There were no heroics discussed in the morning briefings, just coordinates, weather reports, and fuel calculations. The numbers rarely added up to survival past 20 missions. One pilot walked differently from the others, not with bravado, but with the loose gait of someone still thinking through problems. He did not talk much during briefings, but his flight logs showed strange patterns. He returned from missions with less ammunition expended than other pilots, more fuel remaining, and fewer hits on his aircraft. His kill confirmations were often listed as probable rather than confirmed because no one else saw the German planes fall. The engagements happened too fast or too far from the main formation. Other pilots noticed. Some admired what they saw. Others distrusted what they could not understand. The operations officer asked questions about his unusual results. The pilot just shrugged and said he got lucky. But luck does not repeat consistently, and his results repeated mission after mission. Before the war, Drew had worked summer jobs at airfields in Ohio. He watched crop dusters bank steep and low over fields. He saw what happened when a plane stalled in a turn. Snap rolls, spins, the ground coming up fast. But he also saw recovery. He witnessed how a skilled pilot could ride the very edge of control and pull through safely if they understood where that edge was. His engineering education taught him that limits exist not as solid walls but as thresholds. You can touch them and survive if you know precisely what you are touching. At flight school, instructors taught energy management as the foundation of fighter tactics. Speed is life. Altitude is life insurance. Every combat turn costs both. The key is to cost your enemy more than you spend yourself. Force them to bleed speed. Force them to turn tighter. Stay above them, behind them, faster than them. The doctrine was sound. Drew learned it thoroughly and respected what it represented. Then he quietly began testing where that doctrine could bend. On training flights, he practiced alone where no one watched. High-speed rolls, inverted passes, hammerhead stalls. Nothing reckless, just systematic exploration. He wanted to know what the Mustang felt like at the very edge of its performance envelope. He learned to recognize the buffet in the control stick when the wing was about to let go. He learned how much rudder pressure compensated for adverse yaw during a slow roll. He learned how the plane responded when you stopped fighting against it and started guiding it. His instructors saw none of this. He qualified, shipped to England, joined the 361st Fighter Group, and flew his first combat mission in March of 1943. The actual combat was faster and colder than any training suggested. Tracers were brighter against the sky. Fear moved slower than expected. Everything happened in fractions of seconds. But Drew did not panic. He calculated. After his fifth mission, he wrote a letter home. He did not mention fear. He mentioned angles. He told his brother that the German pilots were good but predictable. They climb, they dive, they rely on speed. What they do not do, he wrote, is invert under power at the top of a chandelle. What they do not expect is a plane that rolls through the bottom of a loop without completing the loop. The letter never mentioned kills, just possibilities. The problem facing American fighter escorts was not courage, it was geometry. German fighters attacked from above using gravity and speed. American pilots tried to climb and meet them, but climbing costs speed. By the time a Mustang reached the Focke-Wulf's altitude, the German had fired and dived away. The Mustang would give chase. The German would level out, accelerate, and climb again before the American could close the distance. Energy bled away with every attempt. The bomber stream continued forward. The escort fell behind. Doctrine instructed pilots to maintain formation, maintain altitude, maintain energy. Never chase a single enemy away from your bombers. But this doctrine assumed equal starting positions. It assumed both fighters saw each other simultaneously, and the fight began neutral. Reality was different. The German decided when each fight started. The American could only react. Some pilots tried to outturn the enemy. The Mustang could do this, especially against the heavier Focke-Wulf. But turning fights consumed time and fuel, and the tactic assumed the German would accept a turning engagement. Most were not foolish. They knew the Mustang turned better, so they refused to turn. They slashed through and ran. Drew listened carefully during debriefing sessions. He said little but was thinking about something different. What if the Mustang stopped trying to outclimb or outdive the German? What if it changed the axis entirely? The manual stated that pilots should never invert during combat. Inverting bleeds energy. You lose lift. You present your vulnerable belly to the enemy. All true. But Drew was thinking about timing and surprise. What happens when an enemy expects you to do one thing and you do the opposite in a space they did not know existed? He sketched the idea repeatedly. A high-speed roll at the top of a zoom climb. Not a loop, not a split S. Something between them. A roll into an inverted descent that transitioned into a diving turn. His calculations suggested it was possible. The manual said it was suicide. Drew believed both might be true, depending on execution. When he tried explaining this to others, nobody listened. One squadron leader told him to stick with what works. Another suggested he was overthinking. A third joked that he would lawn dart into the channel. Drew nodded, said nothing, but did not stop thinking. On April 7, 1944, the mission was a bomber escort to Munich. Clear skies, calm winds, good visibility. German fighters were expected. Drew's flight was assigned high cover at 26,000 feet. The cold seeped through gloves and boots. Breath fogged the canopy. The world was silent except for the engine and radio crackle. Bandits called in. 3 o'clock high. A pair of Focke-Wulf 190s diving through the formation. The attack was textbook. Steep angle, high speed, cannons firing. A bomber trailed smoke. The Germans pulled out and began climbing. Drew's element was too far. By the time they turned, the Germans were ascending beyond reach. Drew pushed the throttle to war emergency power. The Mustang accelerated. He pulled into a zoom climb, trading speed for altitude. The Germans saw him. They continued climbing, knowing he could not reach them. Standard procedure. They would climb, level out, and extend. By then, Drew would stall or fall back. But Drew did not stall. At the top of his climb, as airspeed bled through 160, He rolled inverted. Smooth, no hesitation. He held the stick neutral and let the nose drop through the horizon upside down. Gravity pulled the plane through. The controls stayed responsive. He was not looping. He was not diving vertically. He was rolling through an arc that preserved energy while changing his angle faster than any standard reversal. The lead German saw the Mustang invert. He expected it to complete a loop or split S. He adjusted his climb to avoid the anticipated path. But Drew did not follow that path. He rolled upright halfway through the descent and pulled into a high G turn that put him inside the German's arc. The Focke-Wulf tried to brake. Too late. Drew fired. 2-second burst. 50 caliber rounds punched through the wing root. The German plane shuddered. Pieces separated. It spiraled down, trailing fire. Drew pulled out, scanned for the wingman. The second German was running. Drew did not chase. He climbed back to the bombers. His wingman radioed asking what that was. Drew did not answer. He did not have a name for it. It worked. That was all. After landing, the debrief was tense. Drew reported the kill. The operations officer asked him to describe the maneuver. Drew tried explaining roll rates and inverted lift. The officer listened, then told him not to try it again. It was not in the manual. If other pilots attempted it without understanding the mechanics, they would die. Drew nodded. He understood. He did not agree. That night, 2 pilots approached him in the officers' club. They wanted to know if it could be repeated, if it could be taught. Drew said the math holds. If you keep speed above 150, roll smoothly, and understand where the lift vector points throughout, it should work. Should. The word hung in the air. 3 weeks later, Drew was back over Germany. Larger formation. More bombers, escorts, bandits. The Luftwaffe was sending everything. Drew's squadron was jumped from above. 4 Germans, high-speed passes. The formation scattered. Drew broke right, climbed, rolled inverted, and transitioned into the diving turn. Faster this time. Smoother. He knew the feel now. The Mustang responded like it was built for this. 1 German tried following through the roll. Stalled halfway. Fell into a spin. Drew did not fire. The plane was already dead. Another pilot named Vickers saw it. He tried the maneuver on the next engagement. Rolled too slowly. Nose dropped too steep. Pulled 7 Gs recovering. Grayed out. Came to 1,000 feet lower. Alone. Disoriented. He survived. Barely. After landing, Vickers told Drew the maneuver was insane. Drew agreed, but insane is not impossible. Word spread. Some pilots were curious, others hostile. A captain named Riddle argued that tricks do not win wars. Discipline wins wars. Drew asked how many bombers Riddle's formation lost last week. Riddle had no answer. A week later, a German ace attempted the same maneuver against Americans. Misjudged speed. Rolled too aggressively. Snapped into a spin. Crashed into a Bavarian forest. American pilots saw it. Some horrified, others fascinated. The maneuver was dangerous for whoever performed it. It was also dangerous to fight against because it changed assumptions about timing. Drew was called into the squadron commander's office. Major McCollum was tough, fair, tired. He told Drew to stop. The maneuver was not sanctioned. It would get people killed. Drew asked if he was grounded. McCollum said no, just warned. Then McCollum asked a different question. Could it be taught? Could average pilots do it? Or did it require instinct? Drew thought a long time. He said it required math. If you know stall speed, roll rate, and load limits, you can do it. If you guess, you die. McCollum wrote something down, dismissed him. Drew left unsure if he had been reprimanded or recruited. 2 months later, a training syllabus appeared. Unofficial, typed on onion skin paper, distributed to experienced pilots. It described a high-speed rolling reversal with inverted transition. No name, just geometry, speeds, angles, warnings. Drew's name was not on it, but his notebook diagrams were the source. By August, the maneuver was being practiced over the English countryside. Instructors watched from below. Some pilots mastered it in a week, others never tried. A few crashed in training. Command debated whether to ban it or formalize it. The debate lasted months. Pilots kept using it because it worked. In October, a flight of Mustangs engaged 190S near Frankfurt. 3 Americans used the rolling reversal within 2 minutes. 2 Germans went down. The third fled. After the war, a captured Luftwaffe pilot described it in interrogation. He called it the American roll, said it was impossible to counter. You either saw it coming or you were dead. By winter 1944, pilots had names for the maneuver. Drew Turn, Debden Roll, Crazy Ivan. The names mattered less than results. Escort losses dropped. Not dramatically, not universally. But in squadrons where pilots understood the maneuver, the curve tilted. Fewer fighters lost permission. More Germans forced defensive. More bombers made it home. The data appeared in after-action reports. Analysts noticed. By spring 1945, the maneuver was taught at training bases in the United States. Post-war, the Army Air Forces studied it formally. Engineers analyzed film footage. They calculated load factors, energy retention, success rates. They found the maneuver worked because it compressed decision time. A standard loop or split S is predictable. An opponent can track your path. The rolling reversal changes your path mid-maneuver. It requires real-time recalculation. Most cannot recalculate fast enough. Korean War pilots were taught the maneuver as part of advanced dogfighting curriculum, refined for jet speeds. The principles held. Roll at high speed, transition inverted, control descent angle, keep energy. By Vietnam, it was standard. Every fighter pilot knew some version. Most did not know where it came from. The long-term impact is hard to quantify. How many bombers survived because a German broke off instead of pressing? How many missions succeeded because escorts stayed close instead of chasing bandits into vertical traps? The numbers exist in mission logs across decades. They tell a story. One man's refusal to accept doctrine as gospel changed how thousands flew. Drew flew 69 combat missions. 6 confirmed kills, probably more. He survived, came home, went back to engineering, designed crop dusters and small planes. Nothing famous. He did not talk much about the maneuver. When asked, he said he got lucky. The Mustang was good. The Germans made mistakes. But his logbook told a different story. Notes in margins, diagrams, speeds recorded to single digits. He did not get lucky. He got precise. Decades later, at a reunion in Nevada, an instructor asked Drew to describe the maneuver. Drew was 70. His hands shook slightly. His voice was steady. He talked about lift vectors, roll authority, energy management. He drew it on a chalkboard. Same arcs he drew in a Nissan hut 50 years before. Young pilots watched. Some had flown F-16, F-18, jets that rolled faster and turned harder than any Mustang. But the geometry was the same. The logic unchanged. One pilot asked if Drew was afraid the first time he tried it in combat. Drew paused, said yes. But fear was not the problem. The problem was certainty. He was certain the math worked. Less certain he could execute it. But certainty without execution is just theory. So he tried. The plane held together. The German did not. The maneuver is still taught. Not by Drew's name, not with his diagrams. But it is there, embedded in curriculum, in muscle memory of every fighter pilot who rolls inverted at the top of a climb and transitions into a diving attack. They do not know they are flying his math, but they are. Drew died in 1998. Quiet funeral, small obituary. It mentioned his service, family, work in aviation, not the maneuver. Most people at the service did not know. A few did. Older men, pilots. They stood in back, said little. After the service, one wrote a letter to an aviation journal, described the Drew turn, explained what it was, why it mattered, how it saved lives. The letter was published. Few read it. Fewer remembered. But memory is not how legacy is measured. Impact is. The impact of one man's willingness to question, to calculate, to risk echoes every time a pilot inverts at altitude and changes the angle of a fight. Enemies expect straight lines, loops, dives. They do not expect the space between. That space, narrow and deadly and defined by math, belongs to those who dare test the edge of what machine and human can do together. Drew's war was fought in seconds, his legacy measured in decades. One man, one maneuver, one refusal to accept that the book was finished. The sky is full of such refusals, most forgotten. A few, like his, woven so deeply into flight that they became invisible, not because they failed, because they succeeded so completely that they became the new standard. And that is perhaps the highest honor, to change the rules so thoroughly that no one remembers there were ever different rules.